Okay, so we've got the core control systems in place. The FK and IK are working properly. One thing I forgot to set up on the IK was the pull vector, so I'm just going to do that before we get started with anything else. So I'm just going to bring back our IK joints, and more importantly, really, I don't even need the joint. Actually, all I really need is that IK control layer that I created with the IK handle, because that's what the pull vector is controlled by. This little arrow that you see pointing backwards here, that's the pull vector control. And once I create the pull vector constraint, it will essentially, that arrow will always point towards this controller. So to set that up quickly, I'm going to select the controller, select the select the IK handle, go into my constraints, and add a pull vector constraint. And you can see there's that arrow drawing the line to the control. Now if I bring the IK joints back and move that controller, you can see the IK will rotate to match. Okay, so I'm going to hide that and bring back my slave bones. Now, what I need to do at this point is to make the slave bones an actual slave of the other two chains we just set up. And to do it, we're going to use the node editor again. It's not the, again, this is not the only way to set this up. You could do this with constraints. You could do it with driven keys, possibly, which wouldn't be, well, a combination of constraints and driven keys. But we're going to stick with the node editor. Node connections actually calculate faster at a higher level than constraints do. So, you know, in a heavy scene, the more constraints you have, if you've got a lot of them, it will affect the performance of your rig, and it could mean the difference of being able to see reasonably well in real time what you're doing, or having to always play blast your animations because your rig is not efficient enough to keep up. So to keep that efficiency high, we're going to use the nodes. So I'm going to open up the node editor, and it's going to minimize that for a second, or not minimize it, but make it a bit smaller so I can see what's going on. Which is not cooperating. There we go. And yeah, I'm going to bring over the joints that I need to work with. So it will be my left arm, IK, FK, and slave. So I'm just going to expose all of them. And middle mouse click and drag so that they're all in the same window. And I'm just going to stack them vertically to fit the window a bit better. And I'll bring it up and hit A to frame all. So now I've got the information that I need, and I just need to connect them using a blend color node. So I'm going to hit tab, type in blend colors, and hit enter to choose it. And what we're going to do is we're going to use actually 3 blend color nodes, one for each joint. Actually, no, sorry, we're going to use 2. We're just going to blend the upper arm and the elbow. We're not going to include the hand into the blend. We'll control that separately. So we're going to use 2 blend color nodes to blend the rotation values of our IK and FK together, and then pipe them out into the input of the slave bone so it follows along for the ride. And then we can use the blend option on the blender on the blend colors node to switch between the two, so that we can either choose to follow IK or FK or somewhere in between both. Now you might ask yourself, why are we using a color node? And that's a valid question, because this has nothing to do with color. It's all to do with rotation values, and value is really the key word. To the computer, all colors are is 3 RGB values that represent proportion of color in an image. For rotation, those are just 3 values that represent the X, Y, and Z values of a rotation axes or matrices. The blend color node really doesn't care what number we pipe into it. It'll take any value that we want to plug in. And so because we've got a trio of values, X, Y, and Z, we can plug those into the RGB inputs in the blend colors node and just use it as a means to pipe our values from one place to another and then blend between them. So even though it was designed for colors, you can use it for any value really and allow it to again blend any values together at different proportions. So with that in mind, I'm just gonna move this over because it's kind of going. We're gonna blend the upper arms first. So blend upper arm IK and upper arm FK. And I'm going to start with the IK. I'm going to click on the output of left upper arm IK, find the rotation value, click on rotate, which grabs all 3 axes, and plug that into blend colors color 1. Now it will generate this unit conversion node. That's because we are trying to pipe a rotation value into a color value. Maya knows that and creates a conversion node to convert the values over to the blend color, or convert the values over to something that the blend colors node understands. So we're going to take the left up arm FK output rotate and plug it into the same place, into the blend colors node. Now this time, because color 1 is already plugged into IK, it's automatically going to plug FK into color 2. So now we've got to take the output of the result of those two blended together, which is output. We'll take all 3 values, and we got to plug that into the input of left arm slave, and again rotation, and that will complete the graph. Now obviously we've got to do the elbow as well, but let's test it first to see what it looks like. So I'm going to expose my layers for FK and IK joints, and I'm going to rotate the FK forwards, and as you can see, the slave joint, if I select it, is this one right here, left up arm slave, is automatically kind of moving itself based on the values of the original 2. So the IK is not moving at all, whereas the FK is rotating by 77 degrees. And if I look at the rotation value of the arm, you can see it's exactly half of the rotation of the FK. So it is working. Now the default blender value is set to 0.5, which is why it's following halfway. We're going to set up a controller afterwards to adjust that, but just to test it again visually, if I select the blender, so I'll bring my window back, double click on blend colors to bring up its attribute editor, so you can see, oh, that didn't work. Let me try that again. There we go. So blend colors is here, and you can see I've got a slider here for blender. And yeah, if I bring it towards 1, it'll go to IK because that's what's plugged into the color 1. And if I bring it down to 0, it'll blend to the FK. So now I've got the ability to do both. So that's pretty much my switch. The problem is I've only got it working for one joint. I also need that happening for the elbow. If I rotate my elbow, right now nothing's going to happen. So I'm going to keep this in this position, jump back to my node graph and make that second connection. Before I do though, I'm going to name my blend colors node based on what it's blending. So I'm going to copy my left up arm and paste that here. So it's left up arm blend, and I don't need the colors part anymore. I'm going to duplicate that node, Control D, and I'm going to call this one left arm blend. So it's going to be that left arm bone that it's blending between. There we go. And this one is going to be plugged into the same place, the same outputs and inputs on the arm an IK and FK option. So once again, I got to be consistent. So since I used FK in color 1 before, IK in color 1 and FK in color 2, I have to keep that orientation the same. So once again, from the output of left arm IK, rotate, I plug that into the input color 1 of my blend. Output of left arm FK, rotate, gets plugged into color 2. And then finally the output of that node gets plugged into the left arm input, left arm slave input rotation. And I'm going to regraph that. Now with those connections made, if I come back here one more time and now adjust the rotation of my elbow, you can see that's also being shared. So I'm going to zero this out now that I know it's working. Put it back in its default position. And the last thing we need to do is to create the actual switch itself. Now we've got the controller for that in place, but right now it just is a controller called FKIK switch. It doesn't actually have that functionality built in. So next we're going to have to add that into the equation.